Hi guys, good morning. It's Mr. McCorkle here with Dr. Purvis, and it's that time of year. Happy Valentine's Day, Happy National Singles Awareness Day, whichever one you're celebrating. But some of you are maybe graduating in May, and you're sending out more resumes than Valentine's right now, and we're getting a few of those. So we want to talk a little bit this morning about letters of recommendation and references. So, Dr. Purvis, you had some questions about this. What can we talk about this morning?
I do, Mr. McCorkle. These are some common questions that we get. So let's start with the first one. What's the difference between being a reference and being asked to write a letter of recommendation?
Well, I'll tell you, the first one, letter of recommendation, is I think something most of us as professors prefer because we can get it done right away. A reference is something in the future. That's where we give you request our contact information and ask us if we're willing to vouch for your character or qualities or intelligence or something like that in the future. We could be contacted a month from now or 6 months from now, depending upon how long this hiring process takes or how long it takes for graduate schools to review applications and all. But a letter of recommendation, we sit down, we write, we get done, we send it off, and it's done. So it's a little bit different. And references you typically put on an application. They ask for the information right away. A letter of recommendation is something that you ask to have done, and then we send it directly to the graduate school or the business that you're looking at.
So who should be my reference for a job application?
Well, for a job application, let me backtrack a minute. Most places will ask for 3 references or 2 to 3 letters of recommendation, whichever one they choose. Some of them ask for both, but usually it's one or the other. You treat jobs and grad schools differently. A job application, typically you won't have more than one professor write one of those letters of recommendations or serve as a reference. But you want one, ideally someone who's in your major and someone who you did well in their classes and interacted well with. Then, of course, you always want one former colleague or supervisor, maybe not your big boss, but someone who can directly attest to your skills and abilities. And then always you want one reference that can attest to your character.
So what about for grad school? I'm applying to grad school. Who should be my references for that?
Grad school, I shifted around a little bit. I say one major professor, again, someone who can attest your abilities and your intelligence and knowledge in the field. Keep that character reference. Always someone, this can be someone that you've worked with through a church or through a social organization or in the community. Volunteer work is a great place to get a character reference. And your advisor if it's a graduate school application. Your advisor is the person who should know you the best on campus and who should be the best person who can attest to your abilities to go on to grad school. In fact, a lot of times the advisor is the one pushing you to be applying to grad school and challenge yourself a little bit more after those 4 or 5 years of burning out in undergrad.
So how do I ask someone to be my reference or to write a letter of rec? I know who they are, but how do I ask them?
Well, you've narrowed down your list. In a perfect world, you would be able to sit down with each one individually and talk to them about this. But we realize that's not always possible, especially like our public health education program that's fully online. You may have never even set foot in the state. So my recommendation would be a formal email. You want to put it in writing. And there's a few things that email should address. We've talked about emails before, general email etiquette. It shouldn't be starting with, hey, yo. It should have a nice salutation. Dr. Purvis or Mr. McCorkle, address them by name, and you need to include a few things in that. First of all, you're asking someone to do something for you. You don't say, hey, I'm putting you down as a reference. You say, would you be willing to serve as a reference, or would you be willing to write a letter of recommendation? It's rare that we say no if we feel like we can give a good recommendation, but you still want to be polite. You're asking them to do something extra for you. So you phrase it as a question. You need to tell us what you're doing, whether it's a job reference or letter of recommendation or a graduate school, or maybe you might be applying to both. You need to make sure that you provide all your references, professor or not professor, with a copy of your resume, a copy of the job description or graduate school program that you're looking at, especially if it's a graduate school or you're talking to a professor, an unofficial copy of your transcript, or if we've had you as a student, just remind us of your student ID so we can look that up. And why you chose that person. This is something I find a lot of people leave out. They don't tell them why they chose that person. You may have a professor that can attest to your writing skills more than another, or a professor who can attest to your skills in a certain subject area or content area. Or you may just need a general reference. Let us know what you need. That's something very important that I think a lot of people forget.
So, who should I not ask for a reference? Can I ask anyone?
You could, but there are people that you shouldn't ask. And a lot of jobs will specify you cannot have a family or close friend serve as your reference. We don't get an objective viewpoint that way, and that's what they're looking for, an objective viewpoint. So you can't have family, can't have friends, even if they can attest to your certain skills or abilities. That's still inappropriate. This next one, I think someone you should not ask. The best way to say it is a professor who's more familiar with your shortcomings than your abilities. So if you failed their class, if you struggled with their class, you probably don't want to use them as a reference. I once had a student ask me, he failed my class twice and then passed the third time, thankfully. He asked me to write a letter of recommendation for grad school, and I told him I simply couldn't do it. I didn't think it was a good idea because the only thing I could say is that he persevered. I couldn't say that he was doing well and that he should be moving to the next level in this field. Also, just because you've had a class with that professor doesn't mean you should or could ask them for a letter of recommendation or a reference, even if you got an A in that class. If you haven't had any interaction outside of the class, after class, before class, if this professor doesn't know you, then you probably shouldn't ask them to be a reference. And last but not least, there's one more I almost forgot. If you've ever been fired from a job, even if you were good at it, don't put that person down as a reference. Don't ask them to be a reference because they're obligated to tell the truth. So if you were fired from that job, then you probably shouldn't do it. Now, if it was a seasonal job or if you were let go due to downsizing or if you quit due to returning to school or something, that's perfectly okay. But if you were fired, you don't want to be highlighting that on your applications.
So what do I do if I ask someone and they actually say no, they will not be my reference?
This is a common question. I tell you, this is actually a very good thing if someone says no. In a lot of ways, it lets you know that maybe you need to talk to that person and just simply ask them, if you don't mind telling me, why do you feel like you shouldn't be a reference? What characteristics or what abilities do I need to be working on and improving so that you could potentially serve as a reference in the future? And that gives you a little valuable insight on how your professors or how your former employers or supervisors are viewing you and what you might need to work on in the future.
So I found the job or the grad school I want to apply to. When should I contact my potential reference or references?
Well, you've been doing that already. That's something that whenever you're starting to apply to jobs or grad schools, you should be talking to your advisor, talking to your professors. What I would recommend is before you even begin, start looking at and creating a list. Keep it as a Word document on your computer with the contact information, who you've talked to them, what dates, things like that. Maybe a little spreadsheet of at least 8 to 10 or 6 to 10 potential references. And then each time you utilize them, you've talked to them, they said it's okay. Some of them may give you a general, hey, you can use me anytime for a reference. I think you're great. Others, hey, I can serve as a reference, but there's only certain things I can tell employers or potential grad schools about you, so you may not want to use me all the time. And most of us are pretty direct about that. We're going to let you know where you stand. So create that list, talk to them beforehand, and then as you apply to each job, let them know, hey, just wanted to follow up. I'm applying to these 3 jobs. We've talked about references in the past. Are you still willing, or is this okay with you? So beforehand, and then as you apply to each job is when you need to be talking to your references. This is a relationship. If you don't have a relationship with these people, then they probably shouldn't be serving as references.
A little bit, but what information should I provide my references with?
See, I'm going to go back to that list I said in the email. I know it's a little repetitive, but it's very important. I know I have, depending on the semester, 40 to 50 advisees. I think you've got about the same.
Yeah.
We know y'all. We love you. We recognize your faces on Skype. We recognize you when you come in the office, but we can't remember everything about you. And keep in mind, I've been teaching for 10 years. I mean, you've had several hundred students pass through your office as well. So this is something you need to be providing us with again, your resume, you need to be providing us with a transcript, a job description, or a grad school description. Let us know what you're doing. That way, and each time, you may not be using, may use me for a job application reference one time and a grad school reference another time. So we really need that information each time so we can give either the school or the potential employer what they need.
So how much time should I allow my references to write a letter recommendation?
Oh, this is a good one. We've all got a lot going on. It's a busy world. My general recommendation is about 7 to 10 days.
And when should I follow up with them? 24 hours after I ask them?
Well, now, I do recommend a follow-up. Again, we're busy, a lot going on, but give us at least 7 days. Give us 1 week. Then it's perfectly okay to send a follow-up email or drop a message. Just say, hey, how's it going? Especially with a letter of recommendation, because it may not go through that person. It may be sent directly to the school or directly to the employer. And a lot of times we use online forms now, so with the reference, they simply send us a link that we click on and can upload things. And each professor has a different policy. I know my personal policy is after I write a letter of recommendation, I send a copy to the person who asked as well as a copy to whoever it needs to go to.
One thing I'm going to add is if you have a deadline, especially for grad school, make sure you let your references know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't know when the deadlines are, but you all do, so make sure you let us know when that deadline is so we can make sure we meet it. But still give us that 7 to 10 days, but make sure you let us know when that deadline is. Can I use the same references all the time?
You can, but I wouldn't advise it. I think it goes back to contacting that potential reference pool. If you have 6 or 8 to 10 folks that you can pull from, and you want to go back to that list we started with, you want 2 or 3 that can attest to your character. You want 2 or 3 that can attest to certain academic skills and ability. You want 2 or 3 that can attest to your actual job performance or leadership roles. So if you add that up, that's going to get you in that 6 to 10 range, and then tailor each one. Let's say you're applying to a graduate school, then you want to make sure that you talk to the professors and the folks that can help you that are most related to that field, or that can attest to the abilities that they're looking for. If it's a job, the same thing. Pick the references that can give you the best recommendation in that specific area.
Should I list all my references on my resume?
Oh, no. You see this a lot. You see this in a lot of templates, and it drives us nuts. And before I forget, the worst thing you can put on a resume is references available upon request. That's kind of a given. If you're not able to provide references, you probably shouldn't be applying for a job or for grad school. If everybody hates you that much and believes in you that little. But what I recommend is a lot of times you'll have professors, and especially in developmental classes or classes where you're working on resumes, kind of have an optional last sheet of that resume. So you take that Word document or spreadsheet that you have with all your potential references and make a sheet. That way, when they do ask, you can just attach that as a separate document, or attach that, give it to them after your resume. But most of the time, they're going to ask for references on an application. That's why you need to have that potential list already set with the contact information, email, phone number, things like that for your references.
That's all the questions I have for you today, Mr. McCorkle. Anything else?
I think we've covered most of it. Again, happy Valentine's Day. Make sure as you're sending out those Valentines and those resumes, you have a relationship with your references, not just your significant other. Y'all have a great day, guys.
Happy Valentine's Day.